Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for Standing Out in a Crowded Market. What separates successful tap rooms from the rest of the pack? And you all are here today because you want to be the most successful brewery that you can possibly be. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Andrew Copeland with Secret Hopper, and I also run Craft Beer Professionals. Secret Hopper, we work with breweries nationwide to collect taproom data to help create more memorable and profitable experiences. I am literally lucky to spend my days interacting with breweries, small to large, learning as much as we can, talking taproom data, discovering strategies that you all can use to make guest and staff visits more valuable. And we're here today with Jeremy of Central Coast Analytics. Jeremy, you and I connected a few months ago, and I love people like you because I've always appreciated data, but I'm not a data person myself. Sure, when I was a kid, I would read all the stats in the sport page, and that was fun, but I didn't dive into a career of data. I kind of stumbled more so into it with regards to Secret Hopper. But you are born and raised a data person. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thanks for inviting me to nerd up your webinar a little bit here as we dive more into some data. I won't go into all my background, but actually, like you, it's funny you said that you initially got involved in data in kind of the sports page, and that's probably how I started too in the daily paper. But I've stayed with it. So really for the last about 20 years, I've been really involved in data and analytics and how businesses use their raw data and distill that down to be able to get to actionable insights. And now I'm really focused on using a lot of these same capabilities that I've seen in the brewery space. So really excited as I'm starting this business. The real basic business model is just taking all that raw data, transforming it, and then presenting it to people in actionable dashboards. So we won't talk too much about that today, but we'll dive more into the Secret Hopper data that we're here to look at.
And one thing I do love about what you do, you make it easy to understand, and the visuals totally help. So we'll go into the next slide.
Cool. Yeah, so I think how we initially got started working together is I'm always interested in people who have access to lots of complex data. And I know you with your Secret Hopper surveys, you have access to a lot of that data. So we've been working on this, what I think is really interesting project together. And what we basically are able to do is kind of extract all of that raw data across thousands and thousands of surveys that Secret Hopper has processed over time. And what we've done is even though everybody might have a slightly different survey, what we've done is we've been able to normalize that data into topics and categories that would span all the different tap rooms. And then what we're doing, and you can see on the screen as one of our offerings here, we're then taking all of that data and we're visualizing it. So we try to show how a brewery is scoring, or a tap room, sorry, how they're scoring, how they're trending over time. Are they getting a little bit better or worse? And then what's really cool is we're then comparing them to their peer set. So we can basically say this tap room compared to all the other tap rooms in our database, they're either doing a little bit better or a little bit worse than their peer set. And this is a great way for people to be able to dive into this data and be able to get to some of these things that they should go action with their team that's really data driven. So Andrew, you want to set the stage on what we'll be talking about today?
Yeah, speaking of action, let's talk about today's goals. So our hope is that you can use this data alongside Secret Hopper monthly feedback to make smarter business decisions. But what we're going to do first, we're going to discover and look at the top habits of both high and low performing tap rooms. The next, we're going to understand the data behind the tap room, how the data behind the tap room experience has changed since 2017. Then lastly, we hope you here today or watching in the future are going to gain actionable strategies to create more successful taproom businesses. The landscape is tough right now, and it's truly the little things that make a big difference. So we hope at the end of this session, you walk away with a few things that you're motivated to implement immediately. We don't want you just to watch today and say, okay, that data was cool, it was neat, it was really interesting. We want you to see one part of it that you can take back to your taproom and actually actually use. Share with your staff and see results from. And we're going to share several strategies that you can literally implement following this right away that will make you more money and create more memorable experiences for your guests. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how we get this secret hopper data. Secret Hopper works with breweries coast to coast, small to large. And when we work with the brewery, we give them the opportunity to customize a questionnaire. We have a few stock versions of standard report for taprooms that don't have food. We have one that includes food. And on average, they provide feedback on about 50 data points that are all assigned equal point values. Now, this covers everything from first impressions, like was the outside of the brewery properly maintained? Did the staff greet a guest upon entering? To the final actions, like did the staff thank the guest upon leaving? Was your tab returned in a timely manner? And as I mentioned, each question is given the same potential point value, adding up to a total of 100. We believe every little action plays into the big picture, which is going to ultimately result in guests spending more and coming back to your brewery or tap room sooner. The standard monthly report when we work with the brewery is going to include feedback from 4 unique guest visits, varying different days of the week, and observing different team members across different levels of busyness. Now, Jeremy, can you tell us a little bit more about the data set we're going to be using today?
Yeah, sure can. So as we thought about, well, how can we analyze all of this kind of complex data? One thing we tried to do is first see what the average taproom has been scoring at over the last couple of years. And then we wanted to be able to segment all the breweries in this, or all the taprooms in this space, into the ones that were overall very high scoring, the ones that were kind of in the average range, and then the ones that were low scoring. And why we did that was we wanted to include taprooms that are over a long period of time do really well. And they maybe don't just score well on 1 or 2 questions, they really score well across the board. And we want to see, well, what are those guys really doing consistently right, where some of the other ones maybe have some room for improvement. So as we did that, we found that our average score was about 70% across all these different taprooms. Then we basically set our threshold of you're a high scoring taproom if you averaged 80% or more. And we found about 13% of this population fell in that category. And then on the lower side, we found that about 15% generally scored 60% or lower. So what we're going to be doing as we go through some of these next few slides is think about how we compare these high scoring taprooms, and they're always going to be represented in blue, so kind of keep that in mind, to the low scoring taprooms that are going to be represented in orange.
And I do want to point out real quickly that when a lot of breweries start working with Secret Hopper, they're reaching out to us because they know they're missing out on a few things and want to find those areas that they can improve. So often a brewery may come in and on that first month, the score might not be where they want it to be, but because they see the data and use it, they become a high performing tap room.
Yep, great to mention. Okay, so now that we kind of know how we're segmenting this population, let's see what stands out. On this next slide, what we're going to be looking at, I'll explain kind of the visual first, and then we'll get to some of the takeaways. What we're doing across the x-axis, or what's going horizontally, is we're showing the average score of different topics, and the topics are listed in the y-axis or going vertically over there. So let me just kind of, as I'm explaining this, draw your eye to the introduce category or topic, which is the second yellow highlight on the left-hand side. Give you a second to find it on the screen there. And what we're basically going to be seeing, if we're looking at that one specifically, was our average score across all tap rooms was 32%. So only 32% of the time does somebody introduce themselves as kind of the visit starts. And then you'll notice we have a big spread between the blue mark on, as I'm looking at it, on the right-hand side, and the orange mark on the left-hand side. So what that's showing is that high scoring tap rooms, they're still not doing great on this one, but they're closer to 55% of the time they're doing this introduction. And on the low scoring tap rooms, it's all the way down at like 10% on average. So what we're looking at now is there's a 45% difference or spread between those high performers and those low performers. So that seems significant, right? So what we did was we wanted to pick each of those different topics that have a large spread like that. And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit more. So what we're looking at here, the ones that stand out, I have them highlighted in yellow there. We're going to be looking at physical menu, introducing, asking if somebody wants another, offering flights, and conversation. So Andrew, I'm guessing you've talked about some of those topics before.
I have, and let me clarify them real quick. So when we do the questionnaires for the breweries and for tap rooms across the country, there's questions like, were you offered a physical menu? Did the tap room staff introduce themselves? Did they ask you if you wanted another beverage? Were you suggested to begin with the flight? And did the staff engage in conversation with you? And Jeremy's using the shorthand on the left-hand side, which we're going to dive into now.
Cool. Yes, sorry. Yeah, so Andrew, I think that's all I was going to say on that one. If you want to go into that more detail on those.
Absolutely. I'm going to change the deck right now. So we're going to look at the data. Jeremy shared what the spread is between high and low performing tap rooms. And now I want to dive a little bit deeper into those greatest differentiators between those top performers and the low performers. And once again, if you see opportunity, there's room for growth. If your team isn't introducing yourself, if they're not encouraging the second beverage, that means there's only room to go up. So let's look at physical menus. I personally love physical menus because, Jeremy, if you and I are at a brewery together, we're going to look at the menu. Oh, what are you going to have next? Are you thinking about that one? It's going to facilitate conversation. It's going to offer education. It's going to have us start thinking about our next purchase. Even if I'm at a brewery alone and I have that menu in front of me, I'm going to keep looking at it as I'm drinking that first pint, pondering what I'm going to have next. And what the data shows, and this data set that I'm quoting right now is a data set from over 9,000 unique Secret Hopper visits dating back from 2017 to the present. And what we see, guests spend 25% more when offered a physical menu. Now, the menu landscape in beer has changed a ton. A few years ago, you would go to a tap room and have one type of menu. Maybe you were handed a physical menu. Maybe there was a chalkboard. Maybe there was a TV menu. You were typically only given one menu. What we see these days is when you go to a brewery experience, you're trying to make the experience as smooth as possible for all kinds of guests. So you see multiple menu types. However, we see that experiences that only include a physical menu see the highest average spend. And what I mean by that is when you go someplace and it's like the olden days when you only had that one menu type, whether it's a QR, physical, wall menu, if you only choose one menu type, when you have that physical menu, you will see the highest spend. But I do recommend multiple menu types. But once again, physical menus, you should definitely consider having it in your mix. Now let's talk a little bit more about introductions, the value of introductions. When you walk into a place and I go, hi, my name's Andrew, the odds are the guest isn't going to care about this. However, there is value to you because unknowing to the guest, you are creating the beginning step of a relationship that's forming that deeper connection. And what we see is that staff that introduce themselves see tabs 25% higher when that action is part of the many actions that happen during that visit. Now let's hit the other 3 points Jeremy talked about. Want another. Want another has become my shorthand for just encouraging another beverage. And it's really interesting to look at this one because we see tabs $5 higher when staff ask the question, Jeremy, looks like you really enjoyed that lager. Would you like another? It's kind of like magic. When you ask that person if they like another, somehow those guest tabs are higher. And it totally makes sense because we've all had experiences in tap rooms before where you're sitting down at a table, you're at the far end of the bar, and you're finished with your drink. You're waiting. You're waiting for someone to come over to ask you to have another of the beers that you really, really enjoyed, but it doesn't happen. So what do you do, Jeremy?
Hit the road.
And you're probably going to go and you might go to the brewery next door, another restaurant, or you're going to go home. It's so important to just simply ask these questions. And the things we're talking about today, they're not necessarily rocket science, but they're 5 things that we see top performing tap rooms do that often the low performing tap rooms are not succeeding with. So while it may seem like common sense to do these actions, they're not happening a lot of times at some tap rooms. So take note. Now, another controversial topic here, flights. Once again, I personally love flights. And Jeremy, I think you'll appreciate this. I just got back from running an event in Portland, Maine. And as we were finishing up the event, we were kind of going around the coast of Maine. Someone recommended we go to an ice cream place. I've got a 5-year-old. Of course, I'm going to take a recommendation for an ice cream place. And what do you think they had on the menu at this little ice cream shop on the coast of Maine? ice cream flights. It was the absolute most amazing thing I've ever had. My wife and I, you had 4 massive scoops to try all this delicious Maine ice cream. But going back to beer, why I love flights, it truly helps guests find the right beverage. There's so many use cases we'll go over shortly, but whether you're on your first visit to a tap room or you're talking to someone who's been there, week after week, flights can have value to help find the right beverage for right then. And what we see, tabs are nearly 30% higher, 30% higher when staff encourage that flight. The numbers are literally $62 or $48. Which number is more appealing to you? And that $62 represents the average spend when the staff suggests starting with a flight. And for our studies and our data set we use, the average tab consists of about 2 people. And so as our industry tries to attract a broader audience, which is necessary, we look at, markets like Gen Z, and I'm going to quote Craft Beer Advisory Services because they're doing some pretty cool data in this space. They say that Gen Z, those 21 to 27, they want more variety than anything because they're drinking a lot more beyond beer. But with beer in particular, they were looking for variety in what they try. So he conducted a focus group in 2023 with Gen Z craft beer drinkers, and they enjoy trying new and different things. And, as they begin to fine tune and learn about what they like in the world of beer, often they start with something that's similar to domestic. A flight can be a fantastic way to help find what is right for them. Because if they can come to your brewery and find the perfect beer that they enjoy drinking, it could open up doors to other styles of beverage. But if they come in and they just try 1 pint and, I don't like sour beers, I don't like dark beers, they may be one and done, and you could have changed that experience by engaging, by offering a flight. Another thing that's so important that Jeremy mentioned is the value of conversation. Just think about it. I know I go to tap rooms to connect with other people. I love talking to the staff. I love talking to like-minded people who just came over the shared love of beer or beverage. And what we see tabs nearly 15% higher when staff engage in conversation. Just taking the time to talk to those across the bar and build that connection. And also, the tip percentage increases over 10%. So there's financial value to get those tabs up, but also, build those relationships that result in the guests coming back more. And looking at that tip percentage for your staff or yourself, if you're working behind the bar, we see the average tip when the staff engaged in conversation a little over 26%. When staff doesn't engage in conversation, it's barely 23.5%. So guests typically treat staff well, but when you can put that extra effort into conversation, the guests will treat you even better. Now, Jeremy, I'm going to pass it back to you to share some more data.
Cool. Sounds good. All that talk of beer flights got me pretty thirsty. A little early in California, so I'll have to wait a few more hours, I guess. One thing I really like about kind of this analysis we've done is none of these things are rocket science or really hard to implement, right? And we kind of found in 2 different ways that they're really helpful for tap rooms. One is that high-performing tap rooms all do them well, and lower-performing don't do them well. So it's really good for customer engagement, and then you also make more money by implementing these. So it's really a win-win, right? As we get a little bit more into engagement, we want to, so Andrew has questions on the survey that kind of break down, or you rate the engagement level of the staff into high, moderate, and neutral, and low. So then what we did was we basically said, how does that correlate to these other high and low performing tap rooms that we've seen? And probably not too surprisingly, we see that the high scoring tap rooms generally have a much higher engagement score than the low scoring. And you can kind of see on the screen here that high scoring brewery or tap rooms are twice as likely to have that highly engaged staff. And then maybe even worse, we see on the bottom side that the low scoring tap rooms are even 4 times more likely to have that lowly engaged staff. So just staff engagement, I don't want to say just staff engagement because there's a lot that goes into it, but it's certainly a driver of overall performance of tap rooms.
So now I want to show you an image. If you've been to a Secret Hopper webinar before in person, you've probably seen it before, but it's important. It's important because everybody here today likes and probably needs money for your business to be successful. And when we talk about engagement, we divide it between low, neutral, moderate, and high. Low is essentially when you go to a tap room or business and the staff's not encouraging that second beer. They're barely present. They're not having conversation with you. That's when you just don't feel like you have any sort of connection. On the other end of the spectrum, high engagement represents when you leave a tap room, not just saying, well, okay, that was a good brewery visit, but you leave saying, wow, Jeremy was the best bartender I've ever had. I can't wait to come back. And why does this matter? Guests spend 30% more when they receive a high level of engagement. And going back to Jeremy's slide for a second, look at that. Those low scoring tap rooms are only offering a high level of engagement 6% of the time. Actually, 22% of the time. I apologize on that. So we want to make sure, you're engaging with staff on a high level because you're going to see higher tabs, you're going to see higher tips. And when your team is making more money, guess what? They're going to be happier and they're going to stick around longer and they're going to make your life easier. And guests are going to be more likely to come back. When a guest visits a tap room for the first time and they receive a low level of engagement, they're only 45% likely to recommend and return to your business. Essentially, what that means, unless Jeremy's dragging me back there for trivia night, I'm probably not going to that brewery ever again because with so many great options, you don't just need great beer. You need to have that atmosphere. You also need to have engaging staff. And when you get the three of those combined, you have that wow experience that drives guests to keep coming back. So it's so important that you talk to guests, get to know them, offer flights, find what's right for them and provide them an experience. But on the flip side, I talked about, you're only 45% likely on a first visit to come back if you receive low engagement. Guests are 99% likely to return and recommend if they come to your tap room for the first time and receive a high level of engagement. And once again, guests spend 30% more when they receive it. Jeremy, back to you, my friend.
Okay, great. Next, we're going to talk about another section on the surveys, which is around what we're calling on here wait time. And if you think about kind of the life cycle of a customer visit, right, there's a few main milestones in that journey of coming in and getting their beers and then leaving. So first is how long did it take to be greeted? And then following that, how long did it take for your first beverage or flight to come out? Then did somebody come check on you in a meaningful amount of time? And then finally, when you asked for it, how long did it take to bring the check, right? So in our visualization, what we're doing now is we're breaking each of those down into what percent of the time did something happen between 0 and 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, or 5+ minutes. So let's look at that first one, which is just greet time. I won't go through every number on here, but as we kind of look at the data, we see that high scoring breweries, they're in blue, right? 91% of the time a person was greeted in 0 to 3 minutes. So that's great. And then it starts to drop off from there. Now, in this case, low scoring breweries were a little bit less than that in that real short period of time, but not all that much. One thing that was interesting, I was expecting when I got into this data to see more of a spread on some of these categories. But we definitely see it in the check on you time category, which I have highlighted in yellow there. You can see there's a much bigger spread between the high scoring breweries, where usually the wait time is closer to the 0 to 3 minutes or even 3 to 5. And then the low scoring breweries, they're pushed much more towards that 5+ minutes of wait time.
And what we refer to as the check on you time is, after you order your first beverage, how long it takes for the staff to come just check on you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So for the low scoring breweries in this case, it takes much higher percent of them are in that 5+ minutes of they're just waiting for somebody to come and see how they're doing. Andrew, any other thoughts on wait time?
Yeah, I mean, we all have been at breweries as a guest before, and just think about when you walk into a brewery on a busy Saturday afternoon, there's a massive line. You're waiting in the line. It's kind of frustrating. It's taking a long time. But what if the staff said, hey, I'll be with you in just a minute. We're glad that you're here. It goes a long way. People like to be acknowledged. People like to be acknowledged from the minute they walk in the tap room. So places that have something like a host or hostess, that can be really valuable in kind of getting the lay of the land to the guests. Say, hey, here's how it's going to work. Walk them through the process, how they're going to, experience your tap room. It's so important to make people feel like your experience is going to be easy for them to order. The harder you make it, the less they're going to spend. And a lot of it comes down to just you acknowledging them. So make sure you're greeting them, make sure you're checking back on them, bringing things in a timely manner. People like those interactions, and it truly does come down to engagement. And looking at a little bit larger set, I made it abbreviation, which I now realize is a little silly, HEVs, which I refer to as high engagement visits. And looking at these from the past, 7 years, essentially, guests are greeted within 3 minutes on nearly 98% of these high engagement visits. It's so important. It's one of the top performing characteristics of these high scoring breweries, just simply acknowledging people, checking in on them, and just making sure that you're always there if they need anything.
Okay, great. Let's dive into a little bit of trending over time since we have multiple years of data. We went through each of the different topics and we tried to see, well, are we seeing a lot of higher scores over time or lower scores? And what was kind of interesting is a lot of them have stayed pretty consistent. We can certainly see like the COVID impact, right? Like on the cleanliness topic, it goes almost to 100% during COVID. And then since then it's dropped back down. Events is the opposite, right? So during COVID, there were very few events. So we can see some impact related to that. But a lot of the other categories, really, when we were looking at the scores back in 2018, it was real similar to basically what we're seeing today in 2024. But we picked out two that kind of in the atmosphere category that we've certainly seen a long-term trend going up, which you can see on the screen here. And those two categories are merchandise and music. And we've seen those increasing steadily over time. And those kind of go into setting a vibe in a tap room. Andrew, you have more information on setting a vibe?
Yeah, absolutely. As the industry changes, breweries, tap rooms, businesses, they're looking for different ways to make revenue. So many breweries are upping their merch game, which I think this data definitely speaks to. And I love brewery merchandise because when you get someone wearing your shirt, they become a walking billboard for your brand. And with regard to staff attire, which I think directly relates to merchandise, we definitely encourage at Secret Hopper for your team to wear your uniform, because if I walk into, say, Jeremy's brewery and he's wearing a shirt for some other brewery and I've had one beer and I'm just from out of town, I'm going to say, Jeremy, how's that brewery on your shirt? And you're going to say, it's awesome, which is why I'm wearing the shirt. Then I'm going to probably go, oh, where is it? Right next door. And I'm going to probably go have my pint there. But back to your guest, it's truly about getting them to have such an experience that they're motivated to want to buy merchandise. And when we talk about merchandise, there's a few guidelines I want to offer out to all of you today. Don't put it behind the bar. We talk about that line on a Saturday afternoon, the bartender's going a million miles a minute. You don't want to have to interrupt them and say, excuse me, Jeremy, can I please, see if that shirt fits? You're not going to do it. You're probably just going to leave. You want to make sure merch is in a visible location, ideally where guests can touch it to feel how soft it is, to feel, if it meets their standards for what they're looking for. Make sure it has visible and clear pricing. Once again, no one likes to bother a staff member to say, excuse me, how much is that shirt? But also, it's really important to know your audience and know the type of shirts that they're going to want. The best thing you can do to get that feedback is simply ask. If you have an email list, say, hey, we're upping our spring merchandise. What would you like to see in stock? Have your bartenders ask your most valuable guests who come in and they're there all the time. What would you want to buy if we had it on here? Get that data, because data can help you maximize your business and make more money, which we're all trying to do right now. But going a little bit more into a vibe. Am I going to a tap room to simply drink beer? The answer is honestly, maybe. And according to Craft Beer Advisory Services, 25% of brewery goers, they're beer nerds. They're probably like us. Those guests whose beer is the prime motivator for visiting. The next 35% are foodies, and we've done webinars on food before, but those people are looking for something to eat that they're probably going to pair with the beer. The other 40% are social drinkers. They're highly motivated by the environmental elements. And guess what falls under those environmental elements? Music. People are looking for an occasion to visit your tap room. Know your audience and give them that occasion. And as Jeremy talked about, the prominence of music in tap rooms over the years is grown and grown, as have so many other types of events. We don't track all the events that are happening, but we do see how music impacts the vibe. And it's so important because when guests intentionally choose to visit your brewery, I'm going to repeat it again, they're probably looking for good beer. You have to make good beer. They're looking for engaging staff, but they're looking for a memorable atmosphere. And everything from how cold your brewery is to how clean your brewery is to how the music played out affects their experience for the better or for the worse.
Great. So as we're starting to wrap up here a little bit, just wanted to spend a minute. I could talk on this topic for several hours, but I'll do it in 2 minutes right now. And just really driving the point home, as you hopefully got some takeaways from this kind of webinar we were doing, just talking or getting into a little bit more the importance of using data to run your business and to successfully run it. Especially today, this is such a mature market where a lot of tap rooms now need to kind of evolve into being mature businesses. And one way to do that is by really taking your data and analytics seriously. And I'm certainly passionate about this topic, and I have some of the benefits people get from using data. First up, there's just fewer surprises in your business. If you're really tracking how things are trending over time, right? You don't get at the end of a month or the end of a quarter or into the year, and maybe you thought you were doing pretty well in this space, whether it's financial or another metric. And then, oh no, when you actually see the results, it's really bad, right? It also gets you a little bit out of the firefighting of daily issues because you're able to see things slowly trending. You can take action on them before they become that major problem. It also allows you to be much more confident in your decision making, knowing you're basing it on facts and data and less on gut feel. It helps you see increased clarity and really know what's important to focus on. I think sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that we spend time on, right? But maybe that's not really what's most important for your brewery. If you're getting into the data, you can take some of that noise out of there and really focus on what's most critical. And then as you're communicating this out to your team and you guys are kind of problem solving as a group, this can also help sometimes take the emotion out of it and really base your decisions on facts, which I think, well, emotion certainly has a place in business, right? We don't want just computers running our businesses. Sometimes it is good to take some of that emotion out, rely on facts, and the team can function much more effectively together. So I really think there's a lot of power in getting all of these insights right at the fingertips of your decision makers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jeremy. When I first launched Secret Hopper, I had all these ideas and strategies that made sense. Of course, if you ask a guest to order another beer or take beer to go, they're probably more likely to do it. But it's so cool to be able to share with your staff the data behind that and say, hey, by asking this question, on average, you're going to see tabs $5 higher. Or by asking someone to purchase to-go beer, they're going to say yes 49% of the time. It's so fascinating. We have the data to back it and make decisions based on it. So now I want to give you all some easy implementations you can take from today based off the high performing taproom tips that Jeremy talked about a couple minutes ago. First, after today, I want you to evaluate your menu options. And you should probably add a physical menu. Think about, are you able to reach all guests? I'm not sure what you currently have in your tap room, but I would bet if you don't have a physical menu, adding it will help increase tab size. And when I come to visit, I'll really enjoy reading it. Next, Jeremy talked about the power of introductions. This one's super simple. You have to train your staff on doing it. And we don't want people to feel like robots in your tap room. You have to find an authentic way to do it. Something as simple as, hello, my name is Andrew. Welcome to the brewery. Find a way to incorporate it into your routine. If you have staff members who don't want to do it, maybe consider a name tag. You don't want to feel like a Cheesecake Factory, but these little add-ons can start the connection between you and the guest and make it a little bit deeper. Now, another one we talked about, do you want another? Having someone order that next beer. Looks like you really enjoyed that lager, Jeremy. Can I interest you in another? Who doesn't want another beer or something they really enjoyed? These are just really basic scripts you can take back to your team. And I would encourage, when talking to your staff, have them brainstorm different ways they can say the exact same thing. That way they have in their repertoire of little things they can throw out with each guest. Would you like to start with a flight? Now I'm going to pause here and give you some scenarios when this could be a valuable start to experience. Number one, you don't recognize the guest. Number two, the guest says they haven't visited before. Number three, the guest appears confused about the ordering experience. If someone is confused, a flight might be valuable. If I'm a little unsure of what I want, I can't make up my mind. Well, Andrew, would you like a flight? If I'm asking you lots of questions, you've all had that guest before. Andrew, would you like to start with a flight? Or what if you have a huge selection? You know, I don't want to dive into 40 different beers today. That's a lot. More impressive for you for having that on tap. But, would you like to start with the flight? Or if perhaps you have a rotating menu. If you're constantly changing your beers out, even if I'm a regular at your tap room, you might know me as someone who really likes saisons. You can say, "Oh, hey, Andrew, we have a few new saisons on today. Would you like to try a flight, try some of our new offerings?" Let someone find the right beverage for them. And one fun little fact: guests are a ridiculous 457% more likely to purchase to-go beer when staff suggests both a flight at the beginning and to-go beer versus when neither action takes place. And when you ask those two questions and the guest purchases it, tabs are 44% higher. That's a lot. So your bonus tip for today is, we talk a lot about conversations, and as you can see, we know they lead to meaningful relationships. But Jeremy talked about it in his, slide on timing. You got to greet guests. That first moment of someone walks into your tap room, you need to make sure someone is saying hello. And on the flip side, you got to have that goodbye. Thank you for visiting today. No one likes to leave a tap room and not feel appreciated. Start with a hello, end with a goodbye. Try these 4 other strategies, and you will see higher tabs, and everybody's going to be happy. Now, at this point in time, we'd like to open the floor up for any questions. So drop it in the chat. And if after this you don't have any questions, you can reach out to Jeremy and I individually at these email addresses. And we're going to give a sec for everybody to drop those questions in. But, it's been a pleasure working with Jeremy on the benchmarking project with Secret Hopper. And a little bit more about that, what we've done is we've worked with the breweries that are using Secret Hopper data and seeing how they compare against breweries nationwide. It's giving them greater insight to maximize their taproom experiences and stay ahead of the curve. Jeremy, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's been a fun project. Thank you for having me on the webinar today. I always like diving into this data, trying to find what stands out and how we can pass along some of those learnings to other people. So appreciate it.
Thanks for making it so easy to understand. If anybody has any questions following or you're rewatching this webinar in the future, feel free to reach out to Jeremy and I at these email addresses, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Cheers, everybody.
Bye, guys.